Welcome everybody to our next installment of the race of the Aim Sports Learn Fast webinar series. We've been doing these for just about a year right now, coming up on a year. Today actually was the last seminar. I traveled home today a year ago from our last seminar before the pandemic hit. So I've traveled a little bit since after that, but the last on-site seminar that I did was 1 year ago. Pretty crazy. So here we are. We're going to talk about Race Studio 3 configurations, kind of a bigger picture. But what we're really going to dig down into is status variables, triggers, commands, and more. We have had a webinar that was a couple of them that were touched on parts of this, and the guys will probably put it into the chat box, and we'll have the links down for those of you watching on YouTube, we'll have them down in the description box below where Chris Rallo came on and chatted a little bit about alarms, and there was some discussion of status variables and trigger commands in there, but fairly light. And then we also, Robinson had done a webinar with us a while back, and he chatted a little bit about configurations, and that touched into these two things as well. But we wanted to dive in a little bit deeper. There has been some improvements to these functions, so we wanted to jump in there and have a chat with you about these two things plus more, and including a little bit on the PDM side. I know not a ton of you have PDMs yet, but we will talk about how status variables and trigger commands are going to be used in the PDM side as well, even for those of you that are considering getting them. So keep that in mind. And again, I appreciate you guys being here. Let's introduce Robinson, our co-host today. Robinson's been around AIM for quite a bit, since 2017. Can you believe it's been that long, right, Robinson?
Hardly believe it.
Time flies when you're having fun, though, so those kind of things happen. But Robinson's been on the road traveling and doing just a ton of support out at the tracks, and of course once he's back at the office, but support for many racing organizations, including karting, all the road racing stuff, SCCA, NASA, Champ Off-Road, some of the off-road trucks and UTVs, Trans Am, and more. 21 states. I hope you're keeping track of which ones. And I've done a little bit of that as well. I've hit 48 so far. So
Wow.
in all of my travels, not necessarily all for AIM, but a good chunk. And Alaska and Hawaii are the only two that I haven't been to. So give us a little bit of more information about you, and then we will get started talking about status variables.
Well, guys, this little overview is a basic summary. I got lucky to get a job with AIM. Cameron, one of our other technicians here, I knew him personally, and he just thought I'd be a good fit. And so I really grew into the role. I wouldn't say I was adequate for it when I started, but we've had a good time in those few years. We've had, PRI shows, meeting all you guys at the track, at events like that. I've been real lucky to be on board, and the little blurb there at the end with the 21 states, that's been probably my favorite thing with the job. I wasn't very well traveled before this. I've gone on my own vacations to the beach and stuff, a couple states away, but I've gone coast to coast, really border to border now, just haven't gone international. So maybe a trip to Italy one day, Canada, Mexico. Robbie Yeoman in our other office, he goes down to Mexico here and there, supporting races. So might get lucky and join in one day. I don't know if Canada will welcome me. I think I can get to Mexico though. So Canada's pretty stringent, maybe I have too many speeding tickets at this point. But really that's about it for me. Just kind of a regular guy. I think of myself as a regular guy, and I feel like I work with a lot of smart people. And so we've done some of these similar webinars before. Matt Romanowski, who I've stolen some of his work today a little bit, credit to him. Chris Rallo had another really good one. Both of those guys have a lot more direct experience than I would say I do with racers and what they might demand. But then I know our side of things really well. And so I think that gives me a little bit of a different view than what some of those guys might have, just in a little bit of a smaller way.
Perfect. We will chat on Jeff's question there that's in the question and answer box. Not in depth, I'm sorry, Jeff, but we will at least mention it. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, right? I'm always been a fan of boy, if I'm watching some sort of a presentation, it's okay. I know where we're going, and it's kind of keeps me interested a little bit deeper. So what we're going to do is we're going to what is a status variable. Some of you have probably not run into them yet at all, or you've heard the term and you don't really know what they are. So we're going to kind of talk about what are status variables and what are trigger commands. We're also going to touch on math channels and a couple of other smaller and alarms, right? So because they all interact. So we're gonna talk about those. So what is the added value of using a status variable or a trigger command? We're gonna talk about that a little bit, and then we're gonna create a couple, or look at some that are built and show you how to create them. With creating some MXX 1.2 status variables and trigger commands. And then we're going to transition into, because of these particular things are very, very important in the PDM systems. So we're going to talk about what is that greater power and importance in the PDM side. They work virtually the same, but they are used to such a higher level that we wanted to talk about it. And then we will, of course, we may even open up and show you what creating a PDM status variable looks like in the software. So that's where we're going to kind of go. Of course, we're going to feed in any questions and answers that you might have as we go, as best we can, and we'll see where it all goes. So appreciate everybody being here, and we're going to turn it over to Robinson to do the bulk of the talking here, and because he knows much more about them than I do. So that we'll go from there. So Robinson, go ahead and take over. I'll run the PowerPoint and bring up Race Studio 3 from my end. So we'll all have to put up with a little bit of Roger, wake up, go to the next slide kind of a thing. But we'll do the best we can. So go ahead, Robinson.
Well, guys, speaking of this subject, and I know a lot of us in this webinar are now advanced, the people who've been here attending for a year. And certainly there's still stuff we need to cover for our guys who might drop in for tech support and things like that. So the initial steps before you consider a status variable, a trigger command, or really even your alarms, are to set up these items first. You'll get ahead of yourself until these are done. And then once these are done, you can start with your imagination. So first, you'll need to set up your channels. Very simply, what are you getting for analog digital channels? If you're plugging things up, go ahead and program them. You might grow, you might add things as you go, but consider this as a starting point. ECU streams, easy enough. If you're using one, go ahead and select it. CAN 2, so this one's tying in more and more. We see growing CAN 2 usage, and with the PDMs especially, you have you're starting to get a large amount of these things that are getting added on, and how they play in is a huge factor. CAN expansions, that's our Aim devices. So if you have outgrown your channels and you're adding a channel expansion, if you're adding our air fuel monitor, the LCU1, of course, GPS is plugging in there. So anything you're going to have expanded as your initial starting point added in. Math channels, this ties in a lot. It's kind of another way of getting to the root of something that these all tie in so much. And as Matt dropped in, the CAN expansions, or the Rio is a huge one right now, and that ties in a lot to the PDM, but it is with the other devices, 1.2s as well. The power outputs, so those are a bit different for certain systems. PDM has power outputs, obviously. Having those set up is mega to what you want to do later. MXM is another one that has a couple power outputs, and even the MXSL, which is rare for us in North America, but it is out there. Definitely users have it. And last, display pages. So having your display pages set up is also a big part of trigger commands that I think is a powerful tool, but it needs to be there before you start creating it.
They are so intertwined, and you're going to see by some of our examples we do today that it's going to go, you're going to be creating a status variable, and we're going to use many of those other things. And it was the first few that I built, it didn't dawn on me at first, and I kept having to quit, go out, finish the rest of the configuration, and then come back. Really, your status variables and trigger commands are going to be almost the last thing that you're going to do. So I wanted to make sure we mentioned that. And I was real glad when I saw that Robinson had that on his agenda. Perfect. Okay, what is a status variable? A lot of words here. This might be the perfect time to make sure everybody understands that that this PDF, this presentation materials, because we're going to go through this fairly quick. We're not going to sit here and read this, but we'll put a link over into the chat box so you can download this. It's probably already been on there and I missed it, but you can link to the PDF, grab it, and have this presentation materials. If you're watching this on YouTube later, it'll be in the description box below. So you can always grab this and then have this document to look back on. So there you go.
Yeah,
Robinson,
so
what is a status variable?
So this has changed recently with the addition of something like the PDM. Formerly, it was only true or false is all we had. Now it is generally true or false. So, and that'll tie in later down the road here in the webinar. But basically, you're usually going to have a 1 or a 0 based on a set of parameters you've added in with, your channels, your expansions. Things like that are going to get kind of an equation. It's really a math channel. And when those are true or false, we're going to get a ability to flag it, logging it even if we want to. And we have a small example here, where water temperature is higher than 230 and RPM is greater than 200. And, that's a simple one. That's really something most people will probably want to have. And there's obviously more complex ones, but starting simple, I like to do. The more you grow into the system, the more you might open other doors in your head for what else can I do? How else can I tie these all together? But a status variable, true or false, and we have the ability to flag it and log it as we want.
Yeah, and there is a status variable FAQ that's available. It's been linked into the chat box that those of you that are here live, it'll be in the description box. It's a PDF that you can download and learn even more about status variables with an AIM document. So that kind of a backup to some of the stuff we talked about here.
In there as well. So you can go and see how you might actually go and do it if you don't want to come into the webinar and find the specific spot.
Perfect. So then we'll jump to the next one, which is trigger commands. What is a trigger command?
So a trigger command is a way to make something happen, basically. The commands we have now available, which has also grown recently, and I expect to still grow, are, to the next or previous page. You can go to a certain page. If you have a rear view camera, camera 1 or camera 2 active, to be able to take alarms away if needed. And also push buttons or Rio also is involved with trigger commands. So if you need to switch something to make something happen, a trigger command is where we're going to make that all come together.
Yeah, and we'll have some examples of these here in just a bit to show exactly how these work. So, okay, you want to go to the next page? Yeah. And oops, it's so quick on this machine. Alarms. Alarms are what we've been using for quite a while. A lot of you have built your own alarms, but they do tie in together here, which we're going to talk about with some direct experience here in just a moment. But how do you? What are alarms, Robinson?
Well, alarms, for the most part, everyone's using the LED, but we can also use display icons. We can make display pages, display text on the certain pages. And that is the basic of what we see in alarm, but it's a condition that you want to notice is the way I see it. So if there's something that you think is going to be an active, important part of your driving experience, obviously, things like high coolant temperature, low oil pressure, even your shift lights play into this, and predictive are technically some sort of alarm for your feedback into yourself. And there's multiple ways alarms can come on. Status variables have really been where I've moved over to creating alarms. So you create a status variable and you have the ability to make the alarm once you've created a status variable. And I think that is the biggest benefit for most of the user base, is to have a status variable that is equal to an alarm, and it cuts back on your workload a bit if you make a status variable and then add it in as an alarm.
Yeah, and the really big thing is alarms are super powerful, and we've all been using them quite a bit. But the one big thing, the reason that I've switched over as well, and when I chat with people, and a lot of you probably have done the same thing, is when an alarm goes off, you set like the example down below. If the voltage is less than 12 and the engine RPM is greater than 1,000, we expect the alternator to be working and to be putting out 13.4 volts or whatever it happens to be, right? If that is not met, it's going to turn on the number one LED in this particular case, and until that condition is no longer met, that LED is going to be on. Now the trouble with that is you as a driver seen it, everything is good, but we didn't put it into the data file, right? And status variables, you have the option of checking a box, and then whenever that 0 and 1, that 0 it's not is false and 1 is true. When you see a true, and we're going to show you what these look like in a live demonstration here in a moment, you get that in your data later. So even if you forgot it, it's an endurance race and it happened 3 hours ago, and maybe the driver forgot it, or maybe the driver didn't want to say anything, but we can go back in the data and then see that very, very quickly. We didn't have to look at those individual channels and figure it out. We could actually have it being recorded in the data. Very powerful tool, very powerful. Okay, and one more, which is the math channels themselves. Again, all 4 of these are interrelated, and we'll talk more about that here in just a moment.
Yeah, so math channels, and we've had webinars reviewing almost each of these individually in super far depth. So I would recommend that you go back and check them out if you're looking into, something that will help you get your generation of your thought process. What should I do for a math channel? We've had lots of examples, but a math channel is just going to be a calculation where we can maybe even gain a channel that you're not data logging. So math channel creation in the configuration side of things is going to help also cut down on possible post-session work. So if we can build a math channel in the configuration before the data is ever created, when you go to download it, we're going to have a big open head start on things that are going to be in our channels, our data channels of the analysis. This is what I say when I say gain a channel. So if you have 2 things that you might want to do a bias of, braking is a huge one for that. We have bias thresholds, obviously calculated, pre-calculated gear, probably the number 1 and number 2 math channels we use. That's for almost every one of our systems. We use those 2 very often. We've also have a linear corrector and a simple operation. They've gone recently, we've seen since our last webinar, it covered these. They've added a division integer, division modello, and bit composed. And these are a little bit complex for most of what everyone else is doing. I don't really want to touch on those too much. It's going to come into play, I think, for more of a PDM aspect of a webinar. But they are certainly growing abilities, just like we've seen with the trigger commands, new abilities. And not everyone's always aware that these are being added. It's not well announced typically. You actually need to go and look in your configuration every now and then to see if there's something new that you might select or build in. These 3 are fairly recent.
Okay, perfect. And we will, as you mentioned, we will dig into these deeper in other ones. But what we're really talking about is some of the other pieces, and only mentioning math channels here because they tie in, and we're going to see some of that too when we play around here in a minute. So let's jump in there. What we're going to do now is jump out to a live demonstration and chat about building them and testing them, right? And kind of show how this works. So let me bring up Race Studio. There we go. And everybody should be seeing that. Yep. And first off, Robinson, kind of chat a little bit about we've created a webinar MXP configuration here. Let's just chat about the tabs that you'd like to chat about. I'll run the mouse, obviously, and then and take us where you want to go to kind of show how do these work. And we talked about needed to make sure that you built your channels and your ECU streams and your CAN2 streams and all those different things. Let's look at that real briefly and how that's going to affect us, and then let's go ahead and jump into some status variables.
Yeah, and so as you mentioned earlier, I actually covered a good overview of a configuration in my first webinar, and even since that time, I've traveled 7 different states. That is one thing you'll notice in the starting slides. But the channels are analog digital inputs with the 1.2 devices. we see a couple different things versus 1.0. So I'm talking specifically about 1.2s at this point. But channels, simple enough. If you're adding an analog sensor, maybe something not coming from the ECU, you're adding a digital input. Sometimes switches were as digital inputs, but we're seeing that less and less with the Rio edition. So ECU stream is present if you need it. If you don't have an ECU, then you're using channels almost specifically. CAN 2, the same thing. If there's anything that you're adding in, a lot of things like matched tire pressure monitoring system we've seen added and talked about. We're seeing ABS modules, all kinds of devices. Really, it's at this point in time, it's almost limitless what CAN is doing. There's CAN sensors, there's analog sensors. So you're using CAN 2 more and more. A lot of people are interested in that. CAN expansions are CAN peripheral devices. So LCU1 is a big popular addition. Channel expansion is a popular addition, and you see the Rio listed there. And the Rio is remote input output for those who aren't quite aware, and it's basically a CAN signal for switches.
And so what one would you like to go into next? Where do you want to go?
So I think we'll just touch on math channels, since we'll go down the list in line.
Okay.
I know before you had, I thought, one or two of these built, but we have, yeah, we have this, simple enough. We had a couple of basic ones here, but a math channel is, like I said before, a way to gain a channel. So a bias, like a brake bias, is a popular one for sure. A calculated gear is another one. These will tie into your status variables also. You could take a math channel and you could put it into a status variable. So a math channel, you gain a channel, a status variable, you use it again. And so together, you're saving a little bit of work post session if you need to, and you're also adding something that could be valuable to feedback for the driver right away.
One of the ones that I have in here a lot, and I showed it in a couple webinars ago, you have front brake pressure and rear brake pressure. You can, yes, certainly we in the software later we can create that bias channel and then look at what the driver actually had, maybe hand adjusted in the car to get the car to handle correctly. But we can actually do that on the display, as Robinson just mentioned, and then when the team is getting ready for the driver to go out, can jump in the car, push on the brake, and see the front and the rear brake pressure, and have the actual front brake bias percentage shown to them right there. So they don't have to do the math when they're trying to adjust it pre-session. And then the driver can, as the fuel shifts, maybe in a long endurance race or something, they can be looking down while they're on the brakes and see what that brake bias is, and continue to adjust it. So little things like that, calculated gears. Maybe you have a ECU that has a channel that the throttle position is only reading 84% full time. The sensor's not quite right on your ECU throttle position, and you want it to read 100, right? So you can come in and do a linear corrector where you actually just take that value and add the B value to it and add that 15. So you take it from 85 to 100% in real time, right? So you can then use it and see it inside, and not have to do it later when you're really in a rush on your analysis side. You can have all that stuff done. So little things like that are very, very, very powerful. So,
and I think of them as a big help for those who are setting up devices for other people too. A lot of people have no problem configuring a device, but they need the most help with post-session analysis. So if you're able to give them a shortcut, like a math channel that's already built, a simple one even, it's a long way for a lot of people. It carries a lot of value.
Yeah, they're powerful tools. Okay. What's the next one you want to chat about?
So, I think status variables will be fine to touch on now.
Okay.
So a couple things about status variables. If you'd like to open one up, Roger, it'd be good.
Let's do voltage. It's a fairly straightforward one. We'll look at it first, and then we'll open up a couple others.
Yeah, so one big thing about status variables here, you see we have listed just 50 hertz frequency for all these channels. And what you should do by full recommendation is to have the frequency equal to or greater than the highest frequency sampling of a channel that you're using. So depending on what you're doing, there's different frequencies we can select. And, so a lot of things like a temperature, you don't need to have 50, 100 hertz, but you'll probably have it at 5 or 10. And we just need to be equal to or greater than by recommendation. I don't know that if you have it lower, it's going to cause an issue, but it's something that by our design teams, it's said to be higher, equal to or higher than. And so in our examples here, we're higher than every one we have. And status variables themselves, we go with closing that now, but status variables themselves, if you look right below that, we can check mark a box and it's already enabled for us, but it's not enabled initially. And as you see when he hovers over it, it tells you what it's going to do. It's going to enable and log this channel in our data. And doesn't necessarily have to be logged, but I would recommend them to be logged. And when you log them, if you see, and I've taken this from a pro here, tip, this name is SV voltage, and SV is standing for status variable. Status variable, marking it as that when you go to download the data is going to be a huge help, I think. A lot of people have named them straightforward, what they thought they wanted to see, a voltage channel. Well, we have another channel that's voltage, and then you go and figure out which one's which. If you mark it SV, we're going to know it was a status variable. And then if you have any questions as to its exact conditions, you can just come back and reference the configuration that was used. Right below it, simple enough, if true when all, you also have the option of any. So if for any reason you want a status variable with only one condition out of the list you have, that's fine to do it. I think all is really where more people are at with their status variables, because you need one or more, two things to go.
And then in this particular case,
yeah, if you're looking at this particular one, we have RPM, and you have many choices when you select your channels. You also have many drop-down options when you select the choice of greater than, less than. You can see here. Yep, no problem. We can see here what our source is and where our channel that we're selecting is. So you could reference another status variable. If we had a math channel already built, it would show here as well. You can reference a math channel. So there's anything you're sampling, you can basically come in and add it in here.
Okay, let's cancel that.
And then the condition for our RPM is greater than, and we have many options here as well. As you can see, the different selections, greater than, less than, probably the most straightforward. Between values, so if it's you have a high and a low. Sorry, I just had a chat pop up right there where it's at. Equal to, very easy. Different from, very easy. The hysteresis up and hysteresis down, those are pretty good to use also, I think. And I'm not quite sure, the between values came as a little bit of a surprise to me, because that's the way I think of a hysteresis. But it first has to go up and then back above a certain threshold to make it a hysteresis. 500 RPM is what we selected here. Usually most cars are idling higher than that. That is just something that's an arbitrary number for us, but to set it to something that you might want to see, that's our value we're looking at.
Yeah, really just wanting to know when the engine is running. Really that's that's that trigger, and then we have the second trigger.
Yeah. So if basically our car's on and we're not seeing charge, if we're not seeing charge, we're going to have this flag for us as false.
Okay, so let's cancel out of that one. And we have some other ones that we built here. Is maybe we'll open up just another one. Or one of the cool things about this little preview thing is you can just hover over them. So here's a coolant hot, right? So it's I have to leave the mouse there, but it's your coolant is hot, and we're adding it to the log device. If the RPM is greater than 500, the car is running, and the water temperature is greater than 230. We've got this little trigger that's going to be happening and going into the data and being able to be used for lighting and icons and all the other things that we'll be talking about in just a moment. So pretty cool.
And you see here, it's being mentioned in the chat some, but if you look at the very bottom, that's where we add one if we need to add a new one. But it shows you right next to that the still available amount. So there is a limited amount, and anything that's being used in a configuration is taking some sort of processing power. So you have to have some sort of limit to eventually. There's no way it can be infinite. And also part of the limit is based on expected complexity. So the more channels you have added in, the different frequencies, the higher frequencies, all of these things add into what could be done internally. But the status variables, I like to build these as my alarms. And the alarms also have a set number, but a status variable is a little bit a way of taking some time off of an alarm build, because if we do it here, it's already going to be present and available to add as an alarm when we go to that menu to see it.
So where would you like to go now?
Oh, we could hop over to the alarms. We might have a little bit of back and forth here, but
Okay, that's fine. So now we've talked about status variables, and now we're going to go jump in, and they're going to look, you're going to see kind of a similar look and feel to them, but not quite the power of the status variable. Which one would you like to open up? Oops, did we lose Robinson?
well, I think we're experiencing a little bit of difficulty with.
Your camera is, you can go ahead and shut your, maybe turn your video off. We hear you, folks. So can you see my screen? Yep, mine seems to be working. Let me know in the chat if we're seeing, is everybody seeing and hearing everything okay?
I've lost some internet connection here.
Oh, okay. Todd,
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, but you're not hearing us, I don't think, as well.
No, yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. I apologize.
Okay, go ahead.
Some sort of little blurb here in the internet connection. I am wireless. That might have a little play in it now.
Okay, so let's which alarm would you like to take a look at?
So any of them are perfectly fine examples, but I do like the low oil pressures when I examined set up specifically for our little demonstration that we might do with your device.
Oh, maybe open up. There it goes. Okay, so I opened it up, and you can just build a new one and put these in, but we wanted to kind of save our time, so we built one, and then we're just going to walk through and talk about what this is. So this is a low oil pressure alarm, and how did you set it up?
Well, so first it was a status variable. If we look back, it's over there. And the status variable itself has its own conditions, which we build onto with the alarm conditions. At the same time, at the top, we have all or any. And then over to the far right, we have the ability to add some to it if we want. I'm just simply using a status variable I've already had built and then using it to make the alarm. But you have the ability to add a status variable plus an alarm, another separate condition different from a status variable. And so a little bit of imagination goes a long way here. You don't really have too much to limit you. You have a lot of things you can do. And we saw here, I have my status variable, and it has the same name. If you select it, we can see that the source is showing there. So it comes from a status variable, and it comes from the low oil pressure one.
From that one.
Or oil pressure low with RPM.
Okay, that's where it came from. And it's
Yep,
equal to, that means it is true, right? We could also say if it's not equal to, different from, but equal to,
different from,
true or false. And in this case, of course, we want it to be true. Okay, and then things happen.
Yeah, and so a little bit separate from your traditional alarm, which we've showcased in a lot of webinars now. I think Matt Romanowski did a great one on alarms. Chris Rallo also has a good one on alarms. But you have in the status variable almost the same exact conditions that you can select for a singular alarm, but you're making it there, and you have a way to flag it. If you create an alarm, there's no logging ability. And I don't know how many times I've had customers or at the track, and someone else has helped someone else build or set up their configuration, and they have an alarm light. They just don't know what that alarm light was. If we have it set up as a status variable first and then an alarm, and we're already data logging it, then that can really help pinpoint what conditions caused that alarm and when the driver saw it. So that has been the biggest thing, I think, is a lot of shared units. Configurations been touched on by other people, and a lot of even driver training aspects of things, knowing what their alarm was is certainly a good thing to have in your belt. A lot of times it's just simply, I saw the red light blinking. Well, if you go look, they have 3 red lights, 2 on one side, another on another side. That might help you out, but it's really good to know, especially if you're working with someone that needs feedback on what they saw, why it happened. You know, you're diagnosing something with the car. You're trying to tell the driver what he saw, why he saw it. Flagging it by a status variable and then adding it as an alarm is a super good way of clearing things up when it comes down to it.
And then
I do have the triggers.
The triggers themselves, you have lots of different choices. Let's look at that and talk about what those are.
Yeah, so an alarm trigger, and again, it's status variable first, and now I've made it an alarm. But you have the ability to make a message, a display change with the 1.2 device. So if I need a certain field to go a certain color at a certain value, this is where we're doing it. So a lot of times people are using cool water. I see a lot more than hot water even. So once the water's up to temperature, or oil's up to temperature, it goes from blue to like a white. And then if it gets hot, it goes to like a red. But in our example, I'm just doing and you have all your LEDs, you have all the LED colors. You also have output ability, output 1, output 2, and those are digital outputs. The one I've used here is a pop-up message, and it's just race over. So if I have low oil pressure, while I'm under a certain condition that I've put in the status variable, it's time to pull the car over. This is a catastrophic example that we've built here. And you have the text color that you choose also, many options there. And then you also have the image color, basically. So what it pops up as, and then that text is on top of it. I think the 6 months since we've done the last one, we've added the checkered, the slippery, and the mechanic. It is there. So those are very, very drastically different than a solid color. So me, as just part of like a little bit of a joke, I said it's a checkered flag, and you have a red message races over because it needs to pull over, save that motor, come back and race another day. And you have your condition for when it's going to go away. So alarm end would be if my status variable went to false. So if my oil pressure went back above the threshold I had it set for, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to end it. That alarm's going to end automatically if that's what we set. Or you can do a time. So it'll go away no matter what the problem is. If it's still true, it can still be gone, it's sent away. The driver doesn't have to notice it any longer. A lot of people like this just because they don't want a flashing light for certain things in their face all the time. A low oil pressure is probably not one you're going to try and send on a time message. It just shouldn't be ignored, is one of those things. But something like maybe a wheel slip or something like that in a certain corner, they want to go back and look quick and see, okay, and this is, a math channel type of thing. If you have calculated a kind of slip between front and rear wheels, then maybe I only need to know it was in that corner. So 5 seconds is plenty of time for it to pop up. If the driver misses it, it might happen again the next time around, and it'll give it again. So a lot of varying ability here.
I think another one that is in here is coolant. Let's say coolant warm, right? And this one here takes it to a new level that maybe we can just chat about. So if the coolant is warm, and we could go back and look at it, but it's whatever temperature it is. What this one is set to is the LED number 2 comes on and is yellow. The water temperature value itself goes from its normal, color on the background to being yellow. So your eye should be able to look down and see it. But the message that is timed is it's going to come up, and your full TFT screen is going to change, and it's going to have a black background, and it's going to have yellow text, and it's going to say water warm, and it's only going to be there for 5 seconds. So what it's doing is as for you as a driver, it's going to come on, that message is going to be very, very bold and very big. You can't hardly miss it. And then 5 seconds later, it's going to go off, but the water temperature is going to stay yellow. It's not going to go back to being green, and then then the yellow light is going to be on. So
as long as we stay true for this, those 2 will be there. The third one, the pop-up message, the whole screen takeover is going to be gone no matter what after a certain time. So this is really set up that you cannot miss it. there's no reason you shouldn't know what's happening if all this goes on at once. We should really catch it. That's the thing. We're trying to make sure it's seen, with almost an impossible way not to.
And for drivers, maybe that warm condition is such, and you're on the last lap and you're fighting, you don't want your display to be totally obscured by this message, right? Okay, I got it. Go away now for a little bit and let me still see my rev timer, my rev counters and my my lap times or whatever. And so it's really nice you can take that away. Yeah, so pretty cool. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about these alarms, but we're using status variables to kind of set them up, and there's a lot more power there that we haven't chatted about yet. But what's the next one you'd like to chat about?
Trigger commands. So the trigger command is, again, how we make something happen with our unit. More and more of the triggers are tying into the PDM side of things, and again, that's going to be probably a trigger command with a PDM could probably be its own hour if we really wanted it to. But the trigger commands are, from the majority of users now, it's going to be your reverse camera, your mirror camera. It could be a page change is a very popular one coming up more and more, and that's the one we have there at the top set up. Also your digital outs. So digital outs, close to ground. This is where we trigger it. And trigger commands also play big into that remote input output device that we're working with now. And if you'd like to show the example here, I think this was your brainchild, a pit page. So, a line of thinking for a lot of people is to have multiple pages set up for different purposes. And we have the ability to change those with the buttons on the face of the unit. That doesn't always work because you're usually strapped in pretty tight and you can't always reach it. We have our remote buttons kit, which allows for the page commands to still be tied in with CAN. And so a lot of people use that just to have the ability to, on the steering wheel, push the button to change the page and get to the next page. This might be a way that you could eliminate that or have a better way in your head of doing it for the certain reason you want. And there's reasons for all of it for sure, but this is maybe a way that you have of making something happen during a certain condition. Pit page here is showing, like, basically, I think Roger was thinking, the gentleman is coming off the track. So he's no longer looking at what he set up for a racing page. Racing page is going to have, RPM, probably your core key temperatures, maybe speed indication, or what I think of. But a pit page is your full temperatures, your voltages, maybe your rolling time, the exact lap time. But it's going to come on based on, again, conditions similar to status variables and similar to alarms. You have if any or all, and this is true for a trigger command only. So if it's happening, it's true, and it needs to do this. Example, RPM, we again have a field source to select from. The section of less than, greater than, so you're picking what is the condition of it again, and RPM, the value of 2000 or greater. GPS less than 10 miles an hour. So basically, if we seem like we're cruising on in, then it's going to switch to a page, and that is page number 1. But you have the option of any page that you have set up. So if you have a reason to go to page 6 of 8 or page 2 of 8, you can do so. If you want to go back 1 page, if you want to go forward just 1 page, those are all options. Even making that trigger your reverse camera, that's all possible. That's all under trigger commands. So if I want to make a something happen, is the way I see it, a trigger command is where it comes into play.
Lots of options there. And I see a couple of questions here that I don't 100% know the answer to, but is this pit page that I've described here, and that you might want to add some more things to ensure that you're in the pits and you want that page to come up. Are you stuck with it, right? And at this point, I don't think there's any time to this. So if these
No, there's not.
conditions are met, this page we barely look at. I'm going to jump over to the displays in a minute and show it, but this page is going to be there. I don't think there is a way out of it at this point if all of those conditions are met. Tim asks, is there a minimum duration for these variables? At this point, no. The way that I've set it up, at least right now, is boy, once these things hit, that page is gonna jump up in front of us. So maybe that is a good thing for us to add. It has to be, RPM has to be less than this for X number of seconds. Try to filter out some of those, you spun the car or something, right? And you're trying to get it in gear and your dash is changing on you. I think I see the the chances for a problem there for frustration. So
yeah, and came across in the chat through our technician Robbie Yeoman, but you can set a status variable timing command for false.
Okay. So we would set up there another power of status variables that you don't necessarily have in some of the other ones. Okay. Well, we should
and I
look
have
into
to look
that
to be
sometime.
sure, but I absolutely know, and it's coming up a little bit to touch on, but the status variables, we see much different abilities for a PDM setup right now than we do for a 1.2 device. But I've not seen a reason, I haven't really conferred with anyone to talk one way or the other, but I don't see a reason why the status variables won't continue to grow. There's just so much that can be done with them that the demand will be there just to have similar type features.
And when they're built there, they're able to be used in your 1.2 devices as well. Some of those different commands. Just so we jump in and just to show you that a lot of people will like to have different pages, and maybe this page is something you'd want in the pit area, so you can just see what your water temperature, your revs, your oil pressure, your fuel pressure, anything that you might want to see is all in just a real basic big square boxes page, right? Where I did not set these specifically, but you might have a qualifying page where you only see where maybe your lap timing is on predictive. You really are after what is my lap time going to be, and you want limited information other than stuff to absolutely get the maximum out of the car. And when you get to a race page, you have a lot more of your water temperatures and oil pressures and just your lap number and different things that you might want to see during a race versus during qualifying versus in the paddock area. So that's why we do those, and that's why we would like to build some things where it automatically changes that page, so you don't have to go up and push the button or have a Rio where or different things where we can change those buttons. So okay, that's why it is important to set up our displays and our math channels and all these different things, because all of these are being used by these other things. So that's why Robinson mentioned earlier to do all those ahead of time.
And like was mentioned, the status variable can tie into an alarm, can tie into a trigger command. So a status variable is very powerful. And having, I think, like I said, a little bit, having a line of thinking of a driver page, a good status page. These are all, I think, good things to have. And of course, a lot of people don't necessarily like that because they do want to scroll a couple different pages, and they get, 8 pages is a lot. You don't necessarily need all 8. But having a few set up and maybe even having just a trigger command to go to it at certain times when you already know that's kind of when you're going to look for it. I think that's a good thing to think about doing.
And kind of like the little trick that I learned, I think it was Matt that I chatted with, and we started to name our status variables with SV ahead of, and so maybe I stole it from him. But I also do the same thing on these on these display pages. You can come in and just name this check page, but the way the software works, I go ahead and put the 1 in there, because when you go back into that that trigger command and we look at that again, it is, come on baby, open up. Oops, I think it did, and then I clicked on it again. There it goes. It's telling it to go to page number 1, and it doesn't give the name that I gave it. So I always put that in that prefix of the actual page number. Just little things like this, you'll find that will make things easier for you in the long run.
And I think it comes with experience. It does.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Okay, so then the next question is okay, we're building these, and we're building these. Here it is, March. You lucky guys in the South and some parts of the country are already racing, but some of us aren't here in the wet Northwest. So so you want to test them. You want to build them, and you'd like to. Okay, I've got this envisioned, but how in the world do I make sure this works, right? Before I go to the track.
Put it
How do we
out.
do that?
You don't want to have to put it out there and figure it out that hard way. We have a nice way that a lot of people don't seem to tap into of a quick bench test. And if you take us there, I think that's
so we connect to our device with our PC, and we're at you know, we're ready to go. And but we're in the shop, right? So we connect to our device and we go to the live measures tab. And then you have some options that that we haven't, I think we briefly mentioned a couple of them, but let's go into them a little bit deeper here on how to test one of these out.
Yeah, and so like a lot of things in Race Studio 3, if you look on these under live measures directly, there's some buttons. They don't really say necessarily what they do. MV is apparent to me, who someone uses this stuff, millivolts. But if you hover over it, it's going to tell us a quick bit of what it will do. And here in live measures, this is used if you do have maybe a dyno test or you pull into the pits a lot. But I as a technician seem to use this seemingly more for testing. It's a good way to create values, and it's a good way we can also make data recording happen. But each little tab will tell you what it does. But we're really looking over at one thing I like to highlight is the ability on the right side to start data recording.
Emiliano needs, I need to mute his microphone. There he goes. And so you have this ability here to start recording, you know, not just seeing it in live, but you can actually load it in as well.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, you don't necessarily, we have in our configuration parameters that require or start our recording, but we can make it record without having to meet those parameters that you set. And it's a manual way. You can start and you can stop. So if you wanted to create conditions, you're using a dyno, but you don't want to go change your configuration to have GPS forced over. You're on a dyno, you just have only RPM maybe as a common trigger. So come over here and you can start recording. It's going to continue until you tell it to stop. Once you've stopped it, you can go and download it and look at it. So if maybe you want to get familiarized with your status variables, what they'll look like compared to your channels, then start a little recording and go download it and play with it. It's kind of a nerdy thing to do, but it's all possible. And we're going to show you here how to make a value happen without having to have it be a real condition that you're under or experiencing.
Okay, so a couple of things that I really like about the live measures page that maybe if you haven't looked at it closely and played with it, you might not know. So a lot of times we'll have our laptop set over there. We'll be connected to our device with Wi-Fi. We'll be over working on the car and looking at our laptop. But these numbers are pretty darn small to see, right? And if you're trying to see what is my fuel pressure right now, if you could just click on the fuel pressure value, it puts it over here in a much larger yellow box, and puts it over here, and we can stack these. And to me, that is very, very useful. It allows my eye to find it. You know, I'm getting older; my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, right? So we can actually see what these values are. So that's kind of handy, right? And so I can turn that one off, and we can turn on oil pressure. And then one of the ones that we might want to test here real quickly is maybe this oil pressure status variable. So we can bring it over there. It's a 0 right now. So as it sits here, remember the status variable for low oil pressure was RPM above 500 and oil pressure below, I think 5, right? Something like that. So let's bring our RPM into the box as well.
And you don't have to click it on the side, but as you're doing there, I think is the best way. You can also hover over that gear and select to force.
Yeah. So then now that we've got these values here, and we don't even need them over here. If you go on and watch them here, that's fine. But now we've got the little cog, gear here where we can go in and click on that, and we can what we call force the channel. And this is very, very powerful for your testing of your shift lights, and while you're sitting in the car, have your laptop sitting there, and you can do all these things. We can force the gauge into the state that to check your alarms and check your status variables and check all your different things. So let's check this one status variable. Let's force the channel of RPM. Let's take it up to, let's set it at 100, and then we're going to do our steps of, for every time I click on the plus sign, we're going to go 100 RPM more. Remember, we're just trying to exceed 500 in this particular case. So I'm going to click on OK. And you're going to notice there's a red box around that one. and it's a red box over here, and it's added the plus and minus button. So now my gauge, I've got a gauge over here, it's off camera, but the RPM is showing me 100 RPM, just like it's showing you here. And if I click on this, boom, now it's at 200, it's at 300, 400, 500. And now when I go above 500, remember that was what our rule was, above 500, and if the oil pressure was lower than 5 PSI, oops, I pushed on the wrong button. There we go. Over there, I've got my screen is, remember we created that one that came up and said a checkered flag on the background, said race over,
Yep.
right?
Catastrophic.
You can see that status variable is now true instead of false. My RPM is at 600 and my oil pressure is at -1. Okay. If I come in here and now I click on my oil pressure and let's force it, right? You can force multiple channels. And I want to force my oil pressure at, let's go 2, started at 2 and go up, 2 every time I click on it. You tell it, right? Remember it was at 5, I think it was 5 PSI. So if I come in here, there's 4, and I just went above 5, and I'm still above there. The status variable just went to 0. The alarm went off on my gauge over there, and you were off and running. Just a fantastic way of proving what you think you've written. And we all make mistakes.
Yeah, what
less
you think
than
you've written
greater
is the
than,
big
and it's not working the way I want. Boy, it is so great to be able to do these things and check them. You're getting more and more complex with all these things, status variables and trigger commands, to be able to do them in your garage when it's set up, and being able to do it on the computer very, very quickly. You don't need it to be going wrong when you're in your first practice session on the weekend. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not only do you see it here, you should see it on your device.
Certainly you'll be on the device. And if you want to test your, as Robinson mentioned just a moment ago, if you wanted to test it, let's take this back down, right? You could start the recording. And now that you see that kind of grayed out a little bit, it is recording on the data logger right now. And if I were to come down here and do things to make this go away, and then start it up and make it come again, we're going to see that status variable is 0 to a 1 inside the data, the data that is logged. Okay. And then I'm going to stop that data logging, and boom, it's done. So now we could go right over to the download page, and there's that test I just did, and we could download that and check it. Not going to do that today, but gives you an idea. Any other questions or any comments on the live measures, Robinson, and anything else you'd like to show before we jump out and talk a little bit about the PDM as we're kind of closing this out?
No, I think that gives it a coverage. Again, I think it's kind of, to me, it seems a little more basic coverage than what a lot of maybe our other webinars kind of did go over. All these things though are great tools for the big brains that we have, and going through and testing it through live measures is something I recommend. Again, like Roger said, having to check what you wrote is written is a big thing. A lot of times we get, this didn't work the way I thought it should, or this and that, and you go and look and it's just simply been set up incorrectly. But a test will tell you, maybe there's something I'm missing, go back and check. But yeah, that's all I have for the synopsis of this all. I do just have a couple little PDM touches.
Okay, I'm going to answer one question that Joe asked in the question and answer box. He's asking what this icon is here just to the right. And that button, if you hover over it, it makes the device blink. And while you think at first, right, if I push that, you aren't going to be able to see it, but the logger will go through a series of changing all of the LEDs and the screen backgrounds, and it's just going to go through the color of the LEDs. It's just going to flash for about 5 seconds and then stop. And what that is really useful for is if you have a team of cars, you're connected to one, and you're looking out from you're at the table and you're looking out at the car, and you push that button and you know that that's the car you're attached to instead of your teammate's car or something. If one computer is used for multiple, carts or cars or whatever.
Yeah, the best thing I think it's for is to mess with your friends. So when they see it blinking like that, it's an immediate freak out. They don't necessarily know what the heck's happening. They're like, what's going on? And you're like, the joke's on you. I just did that. I love doing that. That's a tech joke there for sure.
Exactly. And as you are, we'll just briefly cover these other ones real quickly as you're getting ready for the
Yeah,
PDM
while we're here.
discussion. That one there is an auto calibrate. So this is where you would come in and set all of your sensors that have the ability to be auto calibrated. They don't need a routine, right? So I could come in here and just auto calibrate all of these accelerometers and gyros, and then exit out. This is the auto calibrate button.
Yeah, what you want to use once you've mounted it. In your mounting position, come and zero it to where it's mounted.
Yeah, always something you do it before. I tend to do it once before the weekend starts. We might even get in the habit of doing it in the morning before the day starts or something. But they hold pretty true. So and then this one here is kind of an interesting one. If this is not the style you'd like to see your channels, we have some different options. We can set it by the configuration alphabetically or channel type being the way I like it, but sort alphabetically, right? So what you can see here now is if you're able to search for it faster and see it by alphabetically, then more power to you. It gives you your position accuracy, number of satellites, all your GPS channels that were down lower a moment ago, or you come back in and sort by channel type, which is the way I like it, or by the configuration, by the way it is being stored inside of the logger itself. So I tend to always just sit there on the channel type, but everybody else you might have some other desire. And then this last one is I'm connected, I'm working. If I just want to shut the stream off and stop being connected, we can do that and then have to go back in and reconnect. So that's what that last button is. Okay, just since we were there, I thought we would cover those very, really quickly.
Yeah, that's nice to do, I think.
Perfect. So let's jump back to the presentation and kind of finish this up. We're right at the time limit, but let's just not going to get deeply into it, but these same exact values are used in the MXSGs, the 1.2 devices. But these same exact things are used in the PDMs. What is the little bit of the differences between a PDM and a standard display?
Well, this is where our language has changed since the last time we've kind of touched on these. Is it used to be a status variable with 1 or 0, true or false, simply. Now it is generally a true or false type of thing. A PDM status variable, we've actually have 3 different items we can set up, are different from our 1.2s at the moment. You have the same condition for activation and deactivation. This very simply, the way you manage status variable comes on if verified, otherwise it is off. This is the one we've mostly talked about today. Then you have different conditions for activation and deactivations. So if you have 2 different conditions for activating or deactivating a status variable, you're going to have the ability to do so, and the multiple output values with each its own condition. So basically, if you want to make a even higher complexity status variable with kind of a status variable on top of a status variable, that is where that comes in. And honestly, the PDM type of status variables, I think it could be an hour of its own. It is so in depth. If you haven't worked with the PDM, but you're curious about them, download the beta software where it's programmed right now and go in there and look and start, seeing what's possible. You can kind of usually think of the PDM might be cutting the way of some of these other devices. So you can maybe see some of the things that might be available as we build them.
Perfect. And and I had one more page, I think, here.
Yep. So still different here with PDM. You have a square wave ability, so you can make a pulse. Do you want to flash those lights on and off real quick? Square wave is the way we do it. You also have the use of timing. So moment, you have in the buttons here, momentary toggle multi-position ability of a status variable. This is more of like Rio keypad line of thinking. And you also have ability for always true and always false flags with multiple of those flags to be able to be added to one single setup.
As I was planning this particular webinar, we were thinking, should we talk about status variables and trigger commands and make it 100% towards just the PDM user. And what we decided on was, let's go ahead and do it at the level we did today, and chatting with folks that can use these functions with their 1.2 devices, and then talk about that there is a difference in the PDM, and then push down the road just a little bit, and we are going to have one of these that is just PDM, and the power, the additional power that comes with that. We'll have another one here fairly soon, where we just get into deeply into the PDM side. So
and the PDM side of things is still growing. Very simply, the customer's imagination and want to make it work a certain way. We've seen a lot of additions fairly quickly and good response. So that's where exactly what you said. There's not a whole lot of user base with the PDM specifically, and these are so in depth it deserves its own topic when we get to it. So I'm looking forward to that, having a full webinar on that type of aspect of status variables alone.
Yeah, perfect. So that so keep that in mind. Watch the calendar, and be ready to have that.
Just
to
a
have
teaser.
That one coming.
A
little bit of a teaser. The we don't have any more questions that are actually open in the question and answer. So, and we're bumped up against the end of our time. So let's talk about that this video, if you're live, it will be placed up on our YouTube site here within an hour or so. It'll be joining 149 of its closest friends and be number 150 up there. And we have lots of other videos there, as well as obviously including all of our webinars for the last year. So take a look at those if you want to look back and chat about, watch, and some of the stuff we chatted about was some of it might have been fairly quick. Always have them in the YouTube video with all the Q&A, and all of the links we talked about will always be in the YouTube video. So keep in mind and go take a look at that. Yeah,
and please reach out to us with questions. I find out a lot of times customers are very they self-helping. They want to find the answer themselves, but then it takes so much time, or they don't find it where they want to see it. And giving us a call, and it's a 5-minute thing you've been spending 30 minutes on. I like when we are able to get you there quicker. So don't feel bad for wanting to email us, wanting to call us. Roger's tagline: we're a customer support, or a customer support company who does data.
That happens to sell electronics. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you on that.
Robinson just tied right into our customer support side and said it very eloquently, that give us a call. Give us a call if you're having any trouble, any issues. Make sure you give us a chance to help you. So our next webinar. Our next webinar is we get questions quite a bit. Some of you are pretty good, and the computers just work flawlessly, and you push on the button and everything works, right? But there are times when we're going to focus on the Wi-Fi side, but it's just as much of a direct connecting from your computer to your AIM device, which most of the time nowadays is with Wi-Fi. So I wanted to put together a webinar where we chat about tips and tricks. I use the word conflicts, tips, and tricks because it actually kind of flowed a little bit better, but I don't mean to have conflicts be the focus of it. We're going to talk about what is it, how does it work, and go through the basics of looking at it, and how to and if we do have some sort of a conflict and some other things, we'll chat about it. So we'll figure out how to put all that together and talk about AIM Sports Wi-Fi. So that looking forward to that one. That'll be a fun one. And by the way, if you're watching this on video, and those of you that are here live, we do these on Zoom, and the 1 hour email is supposed to come out. There's been some conflicts with that, and it hasn't come out to all of them. We are doing a webinar next week, and if you don't save one of your older emails that you have, it is a chain of webinars we're doing. So any of the previous links you've had will get you into watching that webinar, or any of them in the future. So some contact information for Robinson and I. If you have any other questions about some of the stuff we've chatted about today, Robinson's email is there below. Make sure you send them to him. No, send them to either one of us, or any of our technicians, and we will do all our best to help you get through those. Robinson, anything else you'd like to kind of add as we kind of close this one out?
No, I just thank everyone for attending. I know a lot of these guys have been longtime riders with us here. Like you said, it's almost the year anniversary of our first webinar. Basically, the year anniversary of your in-persons having the calls we've had. So it's great to be here. I'd appreciate everyone who says the nice things, that this is helpful to them, and I do hope it helps you, and I hope that we can help you in the future again.
And we're building a ton of content out on the YouTube site that we can direct people to go watch. Certainly, we're going to answer their question right when they call. But hey, boy, if you'd like even more information here, go check out this webinar that we recorded. So, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks, Robinson. I know it's a lot of extra work to put these things together, and it's not always comfortable for everybody to do these. But I appreciate all of our co-hosts that come on, and especially what you've done here today, Robinson. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger.
I appreciate all of you guys, those of you that came here live today. I hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to seeing you all next week, a week from today on Tuesday, and where we're going to talk about some different Wi-Fi stuff, different connection stuff. Thank you very much, and we will see you in a week.
Thank you all.